I think we are about to witness the craziest move for cryptocurrencies ever. And I seriously, from the bottom of my heart, believe that most people watching this right now only partially believe that. They're excited, sure, but I don't think they're bullish enough. I don't think they're excited enough. Very often, I look at these predictions. Van Eck predicts Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana will reach new heights in 2025, respectively $180,000, $6,000, and $500. I look at this and think, brothers, what are we discussing? We're talking about doubling in all these coins. Who gives a crap? Who gives a crap about one of these coins doubling? Real talk. Is that interesting? I mean, maybe, yeah, for the people that are actively bidding on all the Bitcoin out there, because right now there are crazy inflows from the ETFs, for example. They're buying up these coins, all right? So from that perspective, doubling for a fund that is massively buying, get it. Definitely get it. But for the average Joe, doubling is not that. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons that a lot of people do trade. And the reason, well, I'll show you the reason in just a second. But actually, here's a good part of it. So I lost $1 million last week, but made back almost $1 million in the last 72 hours. And I don't know if that's brilliant or I'm mentally ill and should seek psychiatric evaluations. The reason we often show these trades here, for example, is the $250 to about 4K. And I switched accounts, but here you can see we also turned, I'm not so sure how little, how much it was. I think maybe 20,000 into 150,000, something like that. And by the way, if you also want to trade, I've left a link down below to 𝗏𝗏, which you could probably use from anywhere in the world if you want to trade crypto. But to get back to it, it's more interesting to trade in a lot of those instances because, well, if we're looking at this expectation, doubling our money over the next year or so, it's not going to do it. But that's also the reason we go for these altcoins, because there's just so much more possible with them in terms of gains. Even in one season, I've described before why an XRP at $15, $20 or whatever is not that crazy. To get back to it, I've stated before, if we go back to dominance of 2021, from here, it is roughly, let's just say, it will be roughly, let's quickly put it in, it will be roughly an 80% increase. So let's just say it will be about a 2x from where we are at today, just to get back to the 2021 heights. But that was in the middle of the lawsuit. This, by the way, is the XRP price denominated in Bitcoin. And the reason this is more important than the dollar price is because you can measure something in dollars, sure, but it doesn't really hold up well relatively over multiple cycles. I often say, well, we should just take a triple of whatever it was previous cycle, because that's generally speaking what Bitcoin does. And so from there, you have an altcoin multiplier. However, if you want to ignore all that, you just take a look at the relative strength in comparison to Bitcoin. If we look back at the 2017 heights, it's about let's just call it a 10x or so from where we're at today. But if we take the middle, it will be about a 4x at this point here, 300% increase, to just get back to some of the older values, right? And that is actually being very, very conservative. Even going back to roughly, I'm going to say a 6x would still relatively not be that high. And that is from XRP going, times 6 here. Let's just say about $15 or so per coin. And the funny thing, because this is relative to Bitcoin, if Bitcoin is indeed able to double to, let's just call it 180,000 like we just were talking about, that would also put our $15 in XRP at a 6x relative previous strength to also now double, maybe $25, $30, something like that. And I keep telling people, you're not bullish enough, you're not excited enough, because even in this very, very quote unquote bearish scenario, you got to understand, when XRP went to roughly $3, what was Ethereum at? 1,500 or something? Not even 2,000, I think, at the time. So let's just call this a 4x, 4x or so from that earlier price. XRP doing the same sort of number would be maybe what, $10 or something like that per XRP? Maybe slightly higher, slightly lower, around the $10 mark. And Solana really wasn't even around at the time, so we can't compare that one. And again, this is all very, very conservative, mostly because I think we're seeing crazy inflows into Bitcoin. And I don't have it open right now, but we're seeing a lot of reports that these other ETFs, they're coming up. We've seen Grayscale just now, I believe, open their Chainlink fund. We've just seen more and more funds being opened up, being looked at. But the Ethereum fund has been quite slow. And I mean, relatively quite slow. It's still one of the fastest growing ETFs ever. But relative to Bitcoin, many people thought the Ethereum ETF, because of the additional gain possibilities, would go a lot quicker than it did. But I'd say it's a slow start, and eventually it's going to go exponential. A lot of these guys explore Bitcoin, realize, hey, what is there to this crypto game? And that's why you often showcase the cyclical nature of crypto. It's just because everybody usually goes through this. They first, if they've got a lot of money, that is, or are traditional investors, they think, hey, you know what? There's some prospects to Bitcoin. There's some benefits to it, sure. But then they realize, hey, you know what? Everything can be built on Ethereum. So maybe go for that. But then they realize, hey, for example, everything could be built on Solana, but then cheaper. But then they think, yeah, you know what? There's also these type of coins and that type of coins. And well, you know what? Eventually, like, yeah, you know what? Any coin goes and we can make our own coins, etc., etc. That's the real alt season, obviously, when things get crazy. However, I believe that this cycle is going to be changed slightly because I believe the alt season top will this time be marked with all the funds allocating a percentage of their entire fund to crypto. And they're like, you know what? They just start this whole cycle of ETFs for almost the stupidest of coins, at least applications, maybe not approved ETFs. But I think it will all start once Trump gets elected. And the reason I keep saying that is not because Trump is the most amazing of men. You know, every person that gets to power has weaknesses, has bad sides. I'm an honest man in that department. Trump has a lot of good prospects for crypto, but there's a couple of bad hangs as well. And I'd be a fool to ignore every single one of them, but it's just not worth discussing, to be honest. Because for the most part, he can't really do a worse job than whatever was happening right now at the SEC, for example. And if Trump's words really are true, what I'll talk about probably somewhere later today or tomorrow, about a state fund for Bitcoin. They're going to really buy it up and they want to make it the home of it all. It's just a new phase that's starting where these countries are going to start bidding up against each other to buy all the same Bitcoin. Why? Well, because again, there's only that many, right? There's only 21 million that will ever come into existence. And even if they're just joking around with it, which maybe they are, it puts the idea into everybody's heads that this really might be something that's going to happen, that countries are going to want to buy it up to have it as a reserve, just like they did with gold, because, well, you better start as one of the earliest. Nobody wants to be the first. But some countries have already done it, like El Salvador. And I guess companies like Michael Saylor's here with MicroStrategy are doing it. Yeah, it to be honest with you, doesn't really make sense to wait out too long because it's only going to keep getting more and more expensive. And some people like to say, you know what, Dusty? That's why they're going to go for coins like XRP, because that way they have a better way to still multiply because Bitcoin is already so crowded. And that's what they're going to use to pay off their debt. I don't want to say one specific coin that's going to be used for or done with, but it could be Bitcoin. It could be another cryptocurrency. I'm just saying this for the US, for example, would be one of the best ways to pay off debt if they ever want to do that. And the more I say that aloud, the more I start thinking about it. I'm thinking, man, this stuff is all still so small. $100,000 per Bitcoin, for example. I always name Bitcoin as an example. You can always extrapolate from that. The reason I say that is many of you that are watching this don't even hold any Bitcoin. I know that. But first of all, I do. And I always like to cover whatever I'm doing and what I'm thinking. And more importantly, if you're not a Bitcoin believer at all, I'd suggest you to really reconsider how you think the crypto space is going to look over the next 10 years. There's a chance that some crypto will beat Bitcoin. There's a chance of that. But it's not really in our near future, nor is it something I'm too worried about, because you'll see the signs. Every single cycle, there's talks of Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum flipping it or Solana or maybe XRP, which happened before in the past, sort of on total market cap. But whatever, right? Bitcoin now is king. As of that point, some currency might take it over. Maybe the US starts their own crazy crypto thing, and for some reason it wins. I don't mind. It doesn't matter for right now. All we know is that Bitcoin is king right now. It sets the course, and it has the highest certainty of succeeding versus any other crypto. This may change in the future. It may. But this is just the situation for right now, so that's what we base everything on. If Bitcoin does bad, most alts do bad. If Bitcoin does good, most alts do good. If you just use it as a baseline, it makes things way easier for calculating, also because the major funds are primarily getting into that. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I think $100,000 per Bitcoin, really, and the whole space being what, 2 trillion? Bitcoin 2.5 trillion, I think. Let's just quickly see. It's less, I thought. Let's see, 2 trillion actually, exactly, because there's almost 20. I guess there's about 20 million Bitcoin out there right now, and I really start thinking about the inflows. Once more, this doesn't have to be the champion forever, but I'm thinking about it. Yeah. It's like a sort of a bidding war. Sometimes I just sit here and I have that realization thinking, man, I remember making these videos when Bitcoin was what, maybe $2,000 a coin or something. That's also when I made videos, maybe even before that. But I remember those videos thinking, whoa, Bitcoin is so high right now in comparison to what I've seen before in terms of the Bitcoin price. But now I'm thinking, whoa, $100,000 is so high. But I just know that I will keep thinking this every single time I look at these coins. And I know that 5 years into the future, I'll probably be thinking and slapping myself saying, whoa, it really was still so low back then. And so when Michael Saylor starts talking about how the crypto space is going to grow 100-fold from here, I really do believe that. From every single bone in my body, I do believe that. I know it will be hard times in the midst. And so if you're seeing your crypto portfolio go down a lot and you're like, oh, is it ever going to go back up? I personally think it's going to go up by 100 times minimum. It just is going to take some time. But even if you're just a Bitcoin holder, which is the worst one for gains, because even in bull runs, I usually try to switch some Bitcoin for alts, and then in the worst markets, I try to switch them back risky thing to do, but hey, it works. But even for the Bitcoin worst scenario, I still see it at hundreds of what it is right now, hundreds of times in price, but especially altcoins. A coin like XRP, for example, I don't see how people cannot fathom it doing, for example, a 300x from where it is today. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, not within 5 or 10 years, most likely. But first of all, things can really happen a lot quicker than you realize, because the moment a lot of countries start catching on and they really start building reserves, it can scale out of proportion really quite quickly. I think if we do, we'll see a crash also that's going to be an interesting one. But more importantly, at that point, if we really crash hard, it's like a world crash, right? Because if the reserves that they're going strategically for are going to crash by these crazy percentages, it's like gold now crashing by 60%, for example. That would be a really strange world that we are in for a bit. Regardless, so when I add all those things up, I keep thinking, man, yeah, most people just don't see that same vision, I think. Or otherwise, why would they ever go to my comment section scared saying, oh, but should I? The only reason I have to sell is because I think I'm going to buy them cheaper. It's never a sell because I'm afraid it's not going to go up more. I have that with shitty coins, but I know that before I'm going into them, so I'll never ask anybody, because then I know it's like literally maybe there's no point in asking because nobody's going to know, right? But if we're talking about my main coins, no, there's never really a worry. And that's why I keep showing those buy your way down type of charts. Really, I got to keep explaining this to people because they do not understand. I keep seeing the question, should I now? Should I? So simple. If you are a person that's kind of risk averse, you try to wait for very good opportunities by big dips. Why? Because on the short term, that might look kind of easier on you. The negative side being, there might never be a dip. Another negative side being, you're buying when things are looking really, really bad. And again, just because it's down 30% doesn't mean it can't go down another 50% the next few days. So again, it's scarier. If you're just a person who wants to get gains regardless, this is not financial advice. Oh, my camera's a bit stuck, but I'll talk to you anyway. You buy at any point, and you just buy your way down. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because over the history of these cryptocurrencies, you could have never failed. People seem to forget. They keep bringing up, oh, but XRP took so many years. So anybody who ever bought XRP right now is in profit. If you're not, it's because you've been doing it wrong. That's period. With Bitcoin as well. If you right now are at a loss on Bitcoin or Ethereum for that matter, you really are bad at whatever you thought you were doing. It's just the honest truth about it. You can learn. I'm not calling you bad forever, but everybody has to go through something like that, I guess. I'm just saying it's very, very hard to be at a loss right now. It's extremely hard. There's another one thing. You could also be at a loss if you're using too much leverage. That's why I keep saying in all these videos, the reason I use quite low leverage is because I don't want to maximize my potential on every single move. I want to, obviously leverage it by making more gains in every move, but I don't want to maximize it. Theoretically speaking, I can try opening a 50x or even 100x long on XRP right now. Try to get my price lower and but it's very risky. It's hard. And I always say, the worst thing you can get is liquidated. You always want to make sure you keep your funds. So again, if things start going back down, look at this, right? Look at the previous bull market. Some people lost a lot of money on this entire move that did like a 37x for Bitcoin up. It was a year and a half of only up basically. But when you're in it, it doesn't feel like that, right? But so here, for example, this is 40% down over a few days. When you're in it, it doesn't feel like that. When you look back at it, you're like, oh, how did people lose money throughout this time? Either too much leverage or they didn't really fully believe that it was going to do it. And that's why I keep reiterating. Most likely, we'll just repeat whatever we saw back then. It's going to be hard in the midst, but it will very much be worth it, especially if you just believe in the freaking system. Even if you buy at the exact wrong time, you bought at $70,000 right here. This is your first buy-in. Just give it some time, because theoretically speaking, over the next few months, you're going to keep buying yourself a lower price. Eventually, your average price would have been what? Maybe $20,000 of Bitcoin somewhere in 2022. Because it went all the way down to 15,000. You've been stacking up like a madman. You bought at 70,000 first. Oh no. Then you bought 45. Then you bought 28. Then you bought 18. Now your average price is right here at 23,000. Right now you'd be at a 4x. Yes. Yes, it might have taken you what? From November 2021 to November 2024. Might have taken you 3 years. But you've quadrupled your money basically. And you got to understand this also. Your initial buy, let's say for example, might have been $1,000. Maybe at this point here, right, you're buying $10,000, $20,000 worth because you're really convinced now that we're getting close towards the end because you've done the math. It always is about 1 year of really bad times, usually, about 85% or whatever down, and then back upwards. So here you started going really, really heavy in the buys. And now, again, you're not a 4x from whatever you put in at the start. No, you're 4x from a lot of money maybe, perhaps. And so the 4x over that, in this case, you're only being 2 years basically, might now be a very, very significant sum. At least I hope so. And that's kind of the thought process between my moves here and why I'm always so easy making these videos. And people always ask, why are you able to so nonchalantly be at $100,000, $700,000? It doesn't matter to me how much of a loss I have on my trades. It doesn't matter. Whatever number it says right there, and just like how Ponzi said it right here, it could be that I'm mentally ill because when it comes to trading, sometimes I do crazier stuff. But for the most part, I just long. And if I get wrecked, which sometimes you guys don't see, it's actually just because I'm too bullish on the short term. And I know, again, from the outside, that if you just play a slightly longer term game, it's almost impossible to lose. These crazy moves just happen though because you're like, okay, we are going to go up. It's just a question of how much, how quickly. So by that definition, all you got to do is open longs and just keep them open. If you buy way down, it's hard to lose. It really is. But then again, it becomes a question of, but is it better to quickly close it and then try to buy back cheaper? Is it worth it to endure all the pain in the midst? Because if it goes down 30%, it might have been better to just close it at -3% and then try to buy back lower. All that becomes more of a factor. But obviously also, the reason I'm putting this open here is because really there's been crazy opportunities in your life probably, but this, I keep reiterating it, this might really be one of the craziest opportunities you'll ever get in your life. And I just want to say, don't waste it. Every single year I look back thinking, man, if only I was slightly more bullish, if only I was slightly more convinced. And I've got a lot of people asking me, hey, are you really sure this crypto stuff? I've set up accounts for tens of people. Okay, I'm going to say tens because I think it's like maybe 20, whatever. I've set up accounts for a lot of people to start buying crypto. I gave most people some crypto just to start off with that I know really well. With most people not really being convinced in this whole industry. They're just like, I'll follow you. And I say, that's okay, but you should really learn. Most people don't give a crap about learning. I'm yapping a little bit. I know. But yeah, there's just so much money to be made here. It's staggering the opportunity we've got. Every single year I look back at it thinking, if only I was just slightly more convinced, I could have gone slightly harder into this whole crypto space. I could have done more. I could have sold less. I could have blah, blah, blah. And every single time I think the same thing. And that's been the same for every single year. If you look back, every single year I say the same. Every single time I say the same. And with that, you never learn. You really never do. But hopefully you guys can learn from my mistakes in that department, which is just not being bullish enough. It really is. That's, if I could name one mistake, it's not really being convinced that this industry is going to be so good because it feels too good to be real. But it really is. That's it.